Righty, I think we're ready. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cindy DeWeese. I'm the President and CEO of the Clear Lake Area Chamber of Commerce and the Chairman of the Board of the Texas Chamber of Commerce Executives for 2020. Welcome today. We have an exciting program for you and so glad you are joining us. I'm going to turn it over to our Vice Chair of Professional Development, Carrie Schmidt with the Fort Bend Chamber. Carrie, take it away.
Thank you, Cindy, very much. Before I introduce our speaker, I just want to make sure everybody's aware of the chat feature. If you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to type them in it's either at the bottom or the top of your screen. For me, it's at the top. And we will get to your questions at the end and after the speaker concludes his presentation. So at this time, I want to introduce my very good friend, Glenn Smith. He's my friend, my mentor, and for more than 20 years, Glenn has been in the coaching and organizational business, has worked nationally and internationally. He's taught courses on leadership and organizational development in several graduate schools. He's a graduate of the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga and holds an MA in global leadership. He's committed to the Code of Professional Standards and Ethics as set up by the International Coaching Federation. He has created the Business Acceleration Process, a unique and proven process to help business owners grow their business while balancing their lives. He serves clients across the U.S. from our offices in Houston, Sugar Land, and across the country in Dallas. Glenn, we're really pleased to have you with us today. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Glenn Smith.
Well, thank you, Carrie, and thank you, Cindy. Thank you, each of you who are participating today, and even those of you who may be watching this by recording. We're live right now, and I'm excited about being able to share with you today on the topic of business continuity planning. As I work with business owners, and I currently have about 26 different business owners that I'm coaching actively right now. And as I work with these business owners, we're always talking about planning and accountability and goal setting and those kinds of things. But with the recent events, you know, everybody had a 2020 plan, and needless to say, most of those 2020 plans became obsolete in March. And so then you get the whole rest of the year to think about, and things have been uncertain. So what I want to share with you today, and I'm going to ask Ryan, who's facilitating for us from the Fort Bend Chamber, to go ahead and bring up the PowerPoint, and I'm going to walk you through some things here that will help you think about how you plan at a time like this. And so business continuity planning is really important because when something happens that we don't expect, then that challenges our comfortability. It challenges our way of life more than anything. Unpredictable events, they cause us to really just be uncertain about how to plan and what to plan for and what to expect. So Ryan, if you'll go ahead and we'll start working through the slides. In order to act with confidence, we have to be willing to look ahead and consider the uncertainties that might be before us. You know, what challenges could the world present me? Back in March, I created a set of scenario plans for my business, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about how to do that. But I had 4 different scenarios, and honestly, I felt like probably by midsummer, that was about the worst case scenario I had planned for. And I figured by midsummer, things are going to be calming down and getting back to normal, or a certain form of normal. And yet here we are in mid-July, and we're seeing cases go up here in Texas. And, you know, it's the number of cases. Good news is the number of deaths has gone down, but the number of cases go up. We also back in March weren't anticipating some of the social and racial tensions that have evolved in our nation, in our communities. So anyway, so many unpredictable things happening to us. We still need to plan. We don't want to just throw out plans and disregard plans. We still need to plan and be thinking ahead, because we make decisions usually unconsciously. We have certain unconscious assumptions, mindsets, and those unconscious mindsets oftentimes keep us from seeing the appropriate questions we need to be asking, and they also prevent us from oftentimes seeing the best path forward. So we need to think ahead and plan, and that's really what I want to talk about today and give you some suggestions, some guidelines on how to plan at a unique time like what we're in. I know as chamber executives, you are some of the best planners that I get to work with and be around. And so I know the topic is not new to you or as unfamiliar as it is for many of the business owners I work with. But we're going to talk about a business continuity plan. And what a business continuity plan is, it's the outline of procedures to prevent damage, maintain productivity, and recover in the event of a national emergency or a national disaster. And really, we want to, ideally, it'd be great to have this plan in place before an emergency happens. But in many cases for us, you know, this situation happened and we kind of find ourselves right in the middle of it and then trying to create a continuity plan. So you want to plan and execute because that's going to have great bearing on the future of your organization and the psychological and material welfare of your constituents. But what if you have no business continuity plan when a crisis happens? That's where, again, many of us have found ourselves here. And so go ahead, Ryan, to the next slide. If you have no business continuity plan, the best thing you can do at that point is to seek out the counsel and support of peers. And the good news is TCCE and groups like your professional group here, you have immediate access to peers and colleagues and advisors who can help you bridge the gap. Many of the business owners I work with, to be honest with you, are somewhat isolated. They don't get together and engage in professional associations nearly as much as chamber executives do. And so that's kudos to y'all because that network of peers is very powerful. And so they can help you think through and plan together because particularly in this situation, you know, we're all in it together. We're going through it at the same time. But if you don't have a plan, create one today. And we're going to do what Robert Quinn talked about. We're going to be building the bridge as we walk on it. And so that's our approach today. A little different than the normal business continuity planning because we're in the middle of it, but we've got to prepare for an uncertain future. Now, what are the top 6 threats to business continuity? What are the things that we could run into that really call for this? Well, number 1 is a pandemic or an epidemic, and that's what we're experiencing right now. I'd venture to say all of us have not experienced any kind of a serious pandemic like what we're going through right now. But in a business continuity plan, you want to have a plan that'll get you through that. Some other threats to business continuity would be natural disasters. Here in the Houston area where we are, I mean, we're very well acquainted with hurricanes and floods. Some of you are probably very acquainted with wildfires, tornadoes, earthquakes, things like that happen. And looks like we lost our PowerPoint here, but I'm going to keep going with this. Some of the other threats besides natural disasters, there could be utility failures, power outages, loss of communication lines, things like that. There could be intentional sabotage. You know, we don't like to think about that, but I had a situation several years ago where my office building had a bomb go off. There was an attorney upstairs above my office, and there was a disgruntled client who threw a Molotov cocktail in the window of my office trying to blow up the attorney's office upstairs. It's kind of crazy, and certainly wasn't expecting that. But sometimes intentional sabotage happens. Sometimes it's a leak of confidential information, particularly financial information. one of the things that we are hearing more about now is cybersecurity attacks. And so we all have to be conscious of that. So these are some of the threats that, that we have to be prepared for. But as I mentioned, our focus today is on how do we plan in the midst of an emergency situation? How do we do that? And so what I want to give you today are 5 steps, a 5-step emergency continuity planning process. And so here they are. Let's go ahead to the next slide. Step number 1 is preserve cash. It's real important when you're in an emergency situation that you preserve cash, because you don't know what's going to happen down the road. And so first step is, how much cash do you have? Because if you run out of cash, you're in trouble. I mean, big trouble. Cash is king. And so you want to ask yourself first, and I'm sure probably by this time, all of you have done this. You've asked yourself, how much liquidity do we have? How much reserve do we have? You're looking at your memberships, memberships that are coming up, that are coming due. If you've got a lot of members in, for example, in the restaurants, some of the smaller businesses that are impacted greatly, like nail salons, beauty salons, things like that. Those businesses, you may lose them. If you've got businesses that are working, without cash reserve for themselves, you may lose those businesses. So you want to be thinking about your cash flow, thinking about, what can we anticipate? And if we need to create more liquidity, can we do it? For the business owners I've worked with, this is the time that they're all, checking their line of credit to make sure they've got some credit resources. I have one client, he has a pretty substantial business, and he has a $800,000 home that's paid for. He immediately went and got set up. He hasn't had to use it yet, but he got set up so he could actually borrow against the equity in his home to get him through a hard time if he needed to. But you just take action to prepare yourself for cash. You got to have cash. So step 1 in an emergency business continuity planning process is preserve cash. Now let's go on to step 2. Step 2 in the process is to analyze the impact of this on your business, or in our cases, analyze the impact of this on your chamber. As we've already mentioned, you ought to be taking a look at your membership to see, who are we likely to lose? Who's going to do well? Some businesses are actually doing extremely well. I didn't realize it till somebody told me this last week, but the bicycle industry is booming right now. The bike shops are running low in inventory because people are buying bikes, and they're exercising on their bikes. So there's certain businesses, graphic design, many of the technology businesses, web developers, internet marketers, a lot of those businesses are doing extremely well, as you might imagine. But look at your, what do we do as a chamber? What's our core business, and how is that impacted by this situation? Do you have current commitments or obligations? Do you have a lease you've got to fulfill? Do you have equipment leases? You have other commitments or obligations? Look at your current technology. Do we have what we need? Are we going to be able to sustain it? Look at your staff. Who do we have? And what's the status of our staff? And I'm going to say more about that in a minute. Look at your membership. I've kind of alluded to that. Think about your brand. What's the impact of this on your brand? For many of the chambers that in fact, for all of the chambers that I've spoken to, this has had a powerfully positive impact on their brand, because people now, because of the way the chambers have stepped up and they're providing webinars and resources and information, businesses want information possibly more than anything. The way they're connecting them to their political and elected officials, their leaders, the brand of your chamber has an opportunity right now to grow in value exponentially. And so don't just think about the potential negative impact, think about the positive impact as well. We don't have inventory probably, but inventory, vendors, creditors, stakeholders, and then anything else that you can think of that, is going to potentially be impacted by an emergency situation. And so that's step 2. So step 1 was to preserve your cash. Step 2 is to do a business impact analysis. So let's move on now to step 3 in this process. Step 3 is brainstorm, and I want to use the word pivot. Now, there are certain cliches that after this whole event is behind us, we're probably going to create a glossary of COVID cliches. And at the top of it is probably going to be the word pivot. I've heard it so many times, I'm tired of hearing it, as probably you are too. But, the reality is businesses are having to change, chambers are having to change how they do things. And so we do have to pivot. A friend of mine, Howard Partridge, is a business coach and just a close longtime friend. Howard created an acronym for pivot that I thought was so powerful. It's a great tool to help us as we brainstorm and as we think about our future. And I want to just share this with you, and I appreciate Howard sharing it with me. P stands for position. Brainstorm. What's our position? The status of our cash, as I've already alluded to, and what's our position with regards to our team. I have several clients, one of whom I was with this week, that said we have 12 employees. 9 of our 12 have high-risk health issues that they do not want to come back to the office, even if this, even during this time that we've been kind of coming back because of their health concerns. And so, the position of their team or the status of their team was very concerning to them. I have one client who's in manufacturing, working in the oil and gas industry. They unfortunately had to lay off about 1/3 of their workforce. And so, that's the position that they find their team in at this time. So, think about your team. Who have you got? What's their status? What is their capacity right now? And think about your cash position. That's the first thing to think about, and just brainstorm. What can we do? What are our possibilities? One of the neat things that has happened with some of the people I've worked with is they have discovered that certain people on their staff have some unique talents and aptitudes that they didn't realize before, but now that they're needing more support in technology or things like that, they're finding their staff talents come out and shine in some wonderful ways. So P is for position. I is for imagine. We've got to imagine now, what's this going to look like at the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021. I was thinking, about this myself, and you got to think outside the box. Think about your chamber like you've never thought about it before. Think about chamber world like you've never thought about it before. For me, it's like, okay, what would it look like in a science fiction movie? Think sci-fi, get out of the box and just imagine some ideas and some realities that you've never even considered before. And then V stands for voices. And this may be the most important of these 5 brainstorming components. We feed our minds with information. And during a time of uncertainty, we're wanting information. We're needing information. But you really need to be careful, because you can get so much negative information. You can get so much conflicting information. You can get so much emotional and politically charged information that it really stirs you up and inhibits your ability to brainstorm and to lead. So as you think about the voices that you're hearing, including your own, what's your self-talk like right now? Are you speaking encouragement to yourself? Are you getting other sources that speak encouragement to you and stimulate your creativity and your ideas? This is so important that you control the voices that are speaking into your mind and feed your mind with good stuff. O stands for opportunities. What have you wanted to do in the past? I've spoken with some leaders, business leaders, and they said, I've always been thinking about, for example, I've always been thinking about experimenting with a remote workforce. Well, they're not thinking about that anymore. They're doing it. And so there may be other things that you've kind of thought about in the past. I wonder if we could do this, or I wonder what would happen if we tried that. This is a great time to do things different and to try things that you've never tried before. And if you have to report to your board or your governance group, most of them that I'm seeing and hearing from right now are very open to trying anything, trying new things. You don't hear a lot of people going, well, we've never done it that way before. You probably have some, but I'm not hearing a lot. So think about opportunities. What have you never thought about doing? But now, because of this situation, you could. And then T is about being transformed. The truth is, the world will never be the same again. And we have to come to terms with that. There's so much fear and anxiety. Even if we came out with a vaccine, tomorrow, and everybody could get vaccinated, and the immediate fear of COVID-19 kind of came down. The reality is we're all going to be aware that, there could be another virus. There could be another situation similar to this. You might say we've been red-pilled. If you remember the movie, The Matrix, the character had the choice to take the blue pill, which would just he'd wake up and everything would always be the same after that. Or he could take the red pill, and the red pill would take him into the world of reality that he didn't see before. And so because of this situation, all of us have to some degree been red-pilled. We're aware of fears and potential dangers and uncertainties we never were thinking about before. So what that means is we have to engage intentionally in a process of personal growth and personal transformation. And the way I've been thinking about that in my own life is I start every day with a time of reflection. For me, faith reflection is an important part of my daily routine. I journal. I'm thinking about, what do I need to learn today? How do I need to grow? How do I need to calm fears in me? How do I need to calm the fears in my clients? How do you need to calm the fears in your members? How can I be a servant to the people that I serve? How can you be a servant to your membership, to your boards, to your staff? And just think about, how do I need to grow? Because if I'm gripped by fear, I'm not going to be good for them. And so I've got to be growing, and I've got to be a calming presence and a hopeful presence. Not just, give the gory details of information, but to give hope, to give encouragement. And if you're wrecked as a leader, you're not going to be able to do that. So this is one of the most powerful opportunities for us as leaders to transform, for us to grow personally. So I love this pivot acronym. I appreciate Howard letting me share it and use it. But it's a good model for brainstorming. Now let's move on to step 4 quickly. Step 4 is about scenario planning. And maybe you're familiar with scenario planning, maybe you're not. There's a great history about how this has come about. It started as a military tool, and then the oil companies, particularly Shell Oil, the Dutch started using this in a very powerful way back in the 70s. And then even into the 80s. And we're way ahead of the other oil companies in many ways, because they had anticipated scenarios that nobody else had anticipated, but the scenarios became their reality. And because they had a scenario plan, they had a plan of action faster than the other companies did. It gave them a tremendous competitive advantage. So what we want to do in step 4 here is to think about some scenarios, to create 3 or 4 future scenarios. And the way you do that is you take in 3 considerations. Number one, you need to think about what are the driving forces. What are the driving forces right now? And oftentimes with the companies and organizations, we're thinking about demographics, psychographics, customer preferences, economics, technology, the regulatory environment, things like that. You know, as I think about us and as I think about Chambers right now, one of the huge driving forces, and I'm gonna throw out a couple, and we're gonna work with these. I'm gonna share an example of this for you. But you may come up with other driving forces and maybe even better ones than I've got to share with you today. So think about this. One of the driving forces that we need to be thinking about is the economic injury to our nation. We started 2020 with possibly one of the greatest economies in history. And now our economy has really contracted. I'm going to use the word flatline as we talk about this in a moment. And so, you know, we kind of got this economic situation where maybe we're going to be flatlined for a while, or maybe we're going to come out of this and start seeing some growth. And we're seeing some positive things, but, you know, we're not really sure. But whatever happens economically, that's a driving factor. And so a driving force. Another key driving force in my mind for us is the attitude of people, the mindset of people. As I, you know, work in my community here, I see a lot of people are all over the map. On one end, they're over here just, you know, angry or frustrated because they don't really think this is that serious of a situation. Others on this side who thinks it's extremely serious and we should shut down the world until we get a vaccine. And so they have a lot of anxiety, they have a lot of angst, and you got everything in between. And so one of the driving forces for how we move forward is what's the attitude or the mindset of our constituency and of the public. So several of the chambers I've spoken to, the question has been, are we going to do our leadership programs in the fall? Are we going to do certain events in the fall? And so when they've surveyed their constituents, they've gotten mixed reviews. Many of them say, no, you know, I'm not going to feel comfortable coming back. Others would say, well, I'm comfortable coming back. But the bottom line is we're going to have to deal with the mindset and the comfortability, if you will, of the public. That's a driving force. So we're going to come back to those two in a minute, but that's the first consideration, the driving forces. The second consideration is what I call predetermined elements. There are certain things that we know for sure. And we may not, I say we know for sure, we may not be 100% certain, but we're 90% certain that this is going to be the case. For example, I'm pretty doggone certain that moving forward, businesses are going to be using remote technology forever. This is not something we're going to do till we get a vaccine and then we're going to stop doing it. We're going to use webinars, we're going to use Zoom, we're going to use GoToMeeting, we're going to use remote technologies. This is going to stay with us. We may not use it as intensely in the future, but it's not going away. That's kind of what I would consider a predetermined element. You know, what are the slow changing phenomena? The attitudes of people may be slow changing. Like I said, even if we had a vaccine today, they still may not be comfortable right away coming back together. You think about what's in the pipeline today in terms of potential new memberships or new businesses. Think about inevitable collisions that might be coming. So anyway, some predetermined elements that we pretty much know this is going to happen. I'll come back to that in a minute. The third consideration is the critical uncertainties. These are the variables. These are the things that we can identify today, but we don't know which way it's going to go. And we can see that, you know, they're already fluctuating, but we just don't know which way they're going to go. So it makes it hard to plan for the future. Now, let me give you an example. If we go to the next slide here, you'll see an example for Chambers. So economic downturn due to the pandemic, is a driving force. How's that impacting us? Many businesses are contracting. How does that impact your membership and your budgeting? How fast is this economy going to recover? Some people are concerned, may not recover get back to where we were for 2 or 3 years. Who knows? How will businesses adapt and pivot? And how will different industries be affected? So that's a driving force. Then the general public, their concerns about health and safety, I've alluded to that. So those are 2 key driving forces. And then the predetermined elements, I've alluded to, like video technology and other technologies like online presence. Many businesses are using the online platforms like never before for delivering information, for delivering services. And one of the things that I think is going to be a factor in the future, if you're using more online technology, then the whole issue of organic search authority becomes real important. Whereas you may not have thought about, does my chamber or does our organization get found in search when people search on Google or other search engines? If you have a lot of authority, then you're going to come up high in the search engine results page. And so this whole issue of organic search authority is also going to be something that I think is going to be more relevant and more important than ever before. And so the 2 critical uncertainties, and you really need to boil this down to the 2 most important ones. There are a number of variables, but I think probably for you and for my business as well, the 2 critical uncertainties are the economy and the public disposition. So let's move on. To recap, step 4 is to create these scenarios by using these 3 considerations. And then what you do is you take these 2 critical uncertainties and you create a scenario matrix. Take a look at this slide. This is what it would look like. Here are 4 possible scenarios for your chamber. On the top there, maybe there's an economic flatline and public concern and fear continues to be a factor, a significant factor. What are you going to do if that happens? And so you ought to take that quadrant and you ought to write down some plans, some ideas. Here's what we can do. Here's how we'll move forward. Here's how we'll sustain ourselves economically. And come up with some plans and objectives, just simple bullet points for that scenario. Now, if you go to the top right, what if there's economic flatline, but the public just starts getting more comfortable? They get tired of being afraid. They get tired of maybe they're getting tired of wearing masks or even doing, social distancing, but they're getting more comfortable with getting back together. You survey them and they go, we're tired of being apart. We want to come back together. So what happens if that becomes our scenario? And again, take that quadrant and write down 3 or 4 or 5 things that you will do or you could do to move forward, to continue to provide value to your members and to sustain yourself financially. Look at the bottom left. What if we do have an economic rebound? What if we go into the fall and man, things are firing up? I've been watching the stock market. The stock market is pretty interesting. It is really doing a whole lot better than I expected it to be doing. And it's still fluctuating. It's still going up and down. But what if we do have an economic rebound this fall and really have a big one after the first of the year? The president feels like there'll be a strong economic rebound in 2021. But what if we have that and there's still a lot of public concern and fear? What are we going to do? Well, let's come up with some ideas in that scenario. And then a best case scenario is the bottom right, where we have an economic rebound and the public gets comfortable with moving forward, with coming back together. What would we do there? If we had that happen, we might get back to some normalcy like we've been accustomed to in the past. But still, you ought to have a plan, a general plan, not a detailed plan, but a general plan of what you would do in each of these 4 scenarios. So let's bring this home now. Let's go to the next slide. We said in step 4, you want to create 3 or 4 future scenarios, and we've kind of done that here. And you may think about this and change it up a little bit. But step 5 is define your current reality and take action daily. You know, which of these scenarios do we find ourselves in today? So how are we going to act? How are we going to live? How are we going to move forward? How are we going to sustain ourselves financially? Define your current reality, and then every day take action. I encourage people to practice PDCA, which stands for plan, do, check, adjust. Again, this comes from the military. You know, make your plan, take action and do stuff. Then at an appropriate point, stop, check. You know, are we doing the right stuff? Is it getting us what we want and taking us where we want to go? If not, make adjustments and then repeat, rinse and repeat. Plan, do, check, adjust. Plan, do, check, adjust. And just move forward every day, but use those scenarios in your mind in the background to guide you as you define current reality from week to week in your organization. And one last thing I'm going to throw in here is many of you as chamber executives are familiar with EOS. And I'm an EOS implementer, and I use this with lots of businesses. And I actually work with several chambers. And the chambers that have been using EOS that I've been working with have talked about how EOS has been in some ways a lifesaver for them and their staff going through this situation, because it's given them some disciplines, some routines, some accountabilities that they could have easily lost had they not had this tool and this system at work in their organization. So I would encourage you to consider implementing EOS if you haven't already in your chamber. And you can self-implement. Just go to eosworldwide.com, and there are tools and resources. You can read the book Traction and self-implement, or you can engage a trained implementer. And I enjoy helping chambers do this. I'll give you a real quick pitch. If you're interested in someone to help you, I would love to do that. I typically charge my businesses $3,000 to $4,000 per day. It takes 3 days of implementation over 3 months. But I make this available to chambers for half price, for $1,500 a day. So if that's something you can afford within your budget, I think it's really valuable to have an outside implementer who's trained to come in and do that. In your city, you may already know someone and you might want to use them. If it does not fit in your budget, I would still encourage you to consider self-implementing and get with other chamber executives who have done it and who are doing it, and draw on their experience and background to help you with that. So those are the 5 steps of an emergency business continuity process. And Carrie, I'm going to come back to you, and maybe you've got some questions that have come in, and we'll go ahead and wrap this up with some Q&A.
Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate it very much. Yes, I do have some questions, and one of the questions that I have is, you talked about the importance of cash, and you know, chambers are in all kinds of different situations in terms of reserves. What's your thought on number 1, in the future, how much reserves chambers should maintain? And 2, those chambers who do not have reserves, do you think they should be pursuing lines of credit at this time? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, again, you've got to go wherever you can to get cash, because if you run out of cash, you're kind of dead in the water. So if you could get a line of credit, or if you've got businesses that are doing well who can help you carry you through this time, you can draw on them and maybe give them some extra, marketing or promotion or recognitions. I understand the bill's in front of the Congress right now to provide PPP for 501c6s. that's being considered. So if that comes available, and hopefully it will, then the chambers will be able to tap into that. I know they didn't get to tap into that before, but hopefully they will here in the very near future, maybe even this week. But yeah, I would say do whatever you've got to do, legally, to have cash and to maintain cash and have some cash that you can fall back on or draw on if you need it. The question about how much reserve, that's a great question. I always tell the businesses I work with to always have 3 months payroll, or if possible 6 months payroll, or other fixed expenses. So whatever your fixed expenses are, like payroll, rent, those things that they're not going to go away, they're going to be there no matter what, unless you let staff go. Try to have 3 to 6 months reserve of that. More is better, but all of us are where we are, and we got to work with where we are. So just do the best you can with where you are.
Glenn, another question. I know you do a lot of sessions on leadership, and you've talked about how different situations call for different leadership styles, and we all need to be able to pull on whatever's necessary at the time. So what do you think the essential qualities of a leader in this type of crisis are?
Well, I think in any situation, the most critical key to leadership is character, their personal, emotional, psychological well-being. Because if you're not in a good place mentally and emotionally as a leader, you're not going to help your people. And so the number one thing is to make sure you as an executive and you as a leader, you are taking care of your mind, you're controlling what voices you listen to, you're keeping yourself focused every day, encourage, feed yourself with good things, build relationships, nurture relationships with those people who fuel you and help you stay healthy as a leader. That's the most important thing. But beyond that, I would say leaders have to be flexible. And in a situation like this, one day you need to be, the situation today may call for you to be a very commanding, authoritative, here's what we've got to do. Let's go, let's do this. And you may just need to be much more direct as a leader. And sometimes we shy away from that because we think, oh, that sounds too heavy-handed or too authoritarian. But, in crisis, people want direction. When they don't know what to do, they don't know where to go, they want somebody to say, hey, here's what you need to do. And you're very direct as a leader. At the same time, tomorrow, you may just need to be a very empathic, a very just nurturing, caring, supportive leader to a staff member or to a business who's a member of the chamber because of what they're struggling with. And so the ability of a leader to be flexible in their leadership style. Sometimes you need to be direct. Sometimes you need to be collaborative. Sometimes you need to be more persuasive. And then sometimes you just need to be present and empathic. So I would say your ability to flex as a leader is going to be real critical, especially during this time.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you for all that you shared with us. I'm going to first indicate that we use Glenn as our EOS implementer. I'm going to bring Aaron Cox on, Senior Vice President of Texas Association of Business. Aaron's going to give a overview of some of the upcoming sessions, training sessions. He's also going to talk about, we are going to have a session on EOS coming up. So Aaron, can we hear from you next on some of the upcoming events?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to know that you all are out there, even though I can't necessarily see you. It's good to have you with us and to know that you're here. We've got a lot going on at TCCE right now, and we're really excited about the things that we are doing, both in terms of the professional education that's going on, as well as much of the other stuff that's just swirling around. So this afternoon and then first thing in the morning, you're going to see a couple of emails from us. One being talking about a new campaign to stand up for small business. And what it is a series of PSAs and videos that you can share with your community, with your members, to make sure that they are out there talking about the fact that we need to stay safe. We need to wear our masks. And in wearing those masks, we can allow more people to be out in public and support our small business members and those small businesses in our community. The second one is a task force that TCCE has been a part of, and several chamber members were a part of, to develop a new resource guide for businesses across the state. And that will go out. So there's a new resource guide. It's got some pretty specific stuff as it relates to employees and how to cope and how to manage, as well as for employers. And then the third part of that is a survey, and it's a business survey that we will do on a rolling kind of pattern through the end of the year. And it's really a kind of a business barometer where we want businesses to give us feedback on how things are going in their businesses. What is their outlook? How are things, are things turning around for them? Are they getting worse? And we'll be able to report that data at specific increments starting in the middle of August, so that you have an idea of how things are going around the state and in your community relative to the business community. On the professional education front, we have a bunch of stuff coming up, and it's going to be awesome. So we're going to continue the summer seminar series. Next week, we will have a special guest that we are trying to nail down, that I'm sure when you see the name come out, they've been with us before and they are a fan favorite. And so we'll be looking for that announcement soon. We also have sessions coming up on budgeting and finance, on membership development, as well as on the EOS system, as Carrie mentioned. Chamber Basics is still in the works. You all get ready. The 1st of August, we are taking it online, and instead of being one day in one place for an entire day, we're going to go virtual because we can't do that. But it's going to be broken up into a series of modules. So those things that you've seen before, the role of the chamber in the community, your role as a chamber professional, all of those are going to be broken into modules for you to watch in advance of the big day on August the 13th. So we want you to take a look at those, register for it, and get ready. And then on August the 13th, we're going to come together and we're going to talk about the concepts. We're going to discuss issues. We're going to have some conversations that'll help us become better leaders. This year, Chamber Basics, we are really hoping that everybody will participate, not just the newest staff, because you know what? These last few months have proven to all of us that the basics are critical, and sometimes we just have to get back to them to understand what they are. And then as it stands today, Chairman's Conference is still on, and we are going to do it live here in Austin in October. And so we hope that everybody will start to register. We're going to get together, and you know what? If we need to, we will lobby the governor. We'll talk to Mayor Adler, talk to our county judge, and we're going to say, listen, there are some of the coolest people in the country who have all been wearing masks and staying in their offices for the last 6 months. They're coming to Austin, and we're going to hang out because we haven't seen each other in over a year, and that's pretty important to us. So we will keep you posted as to how those conversations go. But nonetheless, we will have a Chairman's Conference in October. And then finally, I will mention TCCE in February. We are planning to do that live, and we will have a date and additional information to you very shortly. And as of this morning, I was on the phone saying, if this doesn't stop soon, then all of us are really going to need an outlet. So the folks in South Padre are working to try to nail down all of the details for annual conference. And so I don't know if Carrie expected me to go that far, but you know what? I think I said all of that to say we miss everybody. We miss you
That's
guys.
right.
I miss seeing you. And, we want to make sure that we continue to stay connected, but then also look at those opportunities we will have to get all back together. So with that, I will turn it back over to Carrie.
Thank you, Aaron. Any words from Madam Chair?
Just thanks everyone for participating. Thank you, Carrie, for putting the program together today. It was great. Thank you, Glenn, for being a part of it. And Aaron's right. We miss everybody. We miss humans and hugs, and we want to see you all really soon. So thanks for joining us every week. We've got some great programs still to come, and look forward to seeing you on my screen next week.
Thank you once again to Glenn Smith. Appreciate his words of wisdom. If anybody's interested in receiving a copy of the PowerPoint, you can let us know and we'll send that directly to you. A recording of the webinar will be up on the TCCE website in at least 48 hours, if not sooner, as soon as we can get it done. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.